Hello everyone, I am today with a very special guest, with Anthony Fitzgerald. Could you please tell us something about yourself?
I'm an executive coach. I had a 50-plus year business career, mostly involved in advertising and marketing and selling. And I worked for Time magazine for 20 years in many countries all around the world. I certainly enjoy meeting people and of all cultures. And I'm certainly very proud of the country I live in. So that enables me perhaps to talk with some pride about some of the things I think are valid.
I teach English as a second language, or for speakers of other languages. I have been teaching for all my life, and there used to be 4 skills we had to teach: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. However, I feel culture is the 5th skill. If people are learning English or they are coming to this amazing country, what should they know about the culture and the cross-cultural communication?
I think the number one trait that most English people live by, I think, is fairness. It sounds very vague, but it's summed up with things like punctuality, politeness, making room for people. If you drive in London, you'll notice in a traffic jam that people will take their turn. There's an unspoken fairness about it. It perhaps isn't the same in a lot of other countries. Driving in Paris or Rome, for instance, is a totally different experience. But it's all about fairness, and people can get very upset if you're not fair. And I think that's arguably, it extends also to manners. And I think there's an awful lot of pleases and thank yous and excuse me's.
Yes.
And saying sorry when you bump into somebody.
And it's both people who say sorry.
And it's the person who's being bumped into says sorry. Now, that strikes a lot of other nationalities as a very strange thing to do.
It is indeed. And you have quite a nice explanation.
Well, the explanation probably is that subconsciously you're diffusing any conflict. You know, people are ready to take offense, and it's increasingly so. These little mannered devices, I should say, should they help to diffuse situations, and we do it without thinking about it. It's not deliberate.
It's so true.
It's just in our culture, you know. This leads on possibly to humour. Now, a lot of people around the world basically find most British humour quite endearing. It's dry. There's a lot of sarcasm. There's a lot of irony. It's dry wit is what's most admired. And again, humour is used to diffuse situations. It's used to avoid conflict and to compromise on situations, and to recognise that, you know, you're not the most important person in the room. You know, there's a certain element of that. We tend to also like to laugh at ourselves. You know, most British humour is about making fun of yourself, and it's part of being good-mannered. It's part of compromise, and people will say amazing things about themselves. You know, the thing is, do resist the temptation to agree with them.
Yes, if somebody says that I am an idiot,
don't agree. You know, they're using it as a conversational device. It can catch people who don't speak English out.
But this is such a good quality to have when you can laugh at yourself, especially when you are learning English, and you can get yourself into so many embarrassing situations because of your language. And there are 2 ways. You either feel awful that you are a failure, that you can't learn, and you beat yourself up, or you have this amazing sense of humor and you just laugh at yourself. And something happens when you laugh at yourself and you think, okay, you know, the brain is happy, you are happy, and you move on. You can only progress. This is really, really true.
If you make mistakes speaking a foreign language in English, people will be very sympathetic. And if you do it with a smile and shrug your shoulders and say, oh my goodness, I've really got to improve, or just, again, laugh at yourself, we'll appreciate that much more than you realise. What else? I think being pragmatic. In other words, so it's happened, so let's move on. That's very much a British trait, and accepting the realities of life. I think, okay, the old stiff upper lip cliche.
Do you think it's changing?
Yes, I do, probably. I mean, I don't think we're quite as phlegmatic as we were. We're great users of small talk. People sit, talk and meet, and they talk about absolutely nothing. They talk about sporting things. They talk about the weather, endlessly about the weather, because we're a small island in the middle of the Atlantic. So our weather changes the whole time. And it's it's a wonderful way of breaking the ice, to carry the metaphor on, to talk to people and just say ridiculous things like, it's turned out nice for this time of year. You know, it's a completely pointless phrase, but it allows the other person to enter your sphere, to enter your world, and it can create conversation. And if it's done in a friendly way, it can lead to further revelations, conversational revelations.
When we talk about small talk, there are a few topics that the British do not like talking about, or we'd better avoid them.
Well, they always say avoid politics and religion,
And money.
Yes, and yes, certainly money and earning power and things like that would be offensive. Hard to avoid politics, I must say. Narrowing down culture. I mean, we're really proud of our culture. And nobody's saying that it's any better than anybody else's culture. It's, of course, everybody's culture is native to their own country. It's peculiar to their own country. But we've contributed a huge amount to the world's culture in literature and theatre and films and music to a certain extent, although other countries have probably contributed more than us to classical music, but we've contributed hugely to popular music all over the world. And our buildings, people come from all over the world to see them, our countryside. It's all part of our culture, and we're very, very proud of it. I think it's really important to know that people younger than me, and I'm talking about most of the population,
Anthony.
are probably are perceived to be much more open-minded. I think I'm pretty open-minded actually, but the differences of race and colour and religion and gender orientation, it's very controversial, certainly at the moment, and it's just something that the younger generations are really, by and large, accept that everybody on this planet is unique and that we're basically all equal. There are, of course, there are exceptions. I mean, we all know of them, and a lot of the exceptions are my generation. But it's something that is probably best to avoid getting too deep into, because it's very controversial at the moment. What else? Class.
Oh, yes. Could you please tell us something?
Well, yeah, everybody outside this country thinks we're riddled with class. You know, that there's upper, middle, and lower class, and there's aristocrats and everything else. And
we know a lot about this also from the literature. That was always...
Yes, you're absolutely right. The literature has pointed at that, and our great literature, of course, is riddled with class references.
It is.
Because it did apply.
Yes.
Up to possibly the last war. I think our films too, our older films will refer to it, and it's really a vanishing issue. It still exists. There's no doubt about that. It still exists, but on a very vanishing scale. And you get references to working class families, that you hear that a lot in the politics. They use it as a sort of byword. And all it means is that there's respect for people who work hard, are resilient, who don't have airs and graces, who don't think too much of themselves, or that get on with it. That it's not a pejorative thing. It's good. And of course there are the aristocrats and people with titles, and that's fine. We take them as we find them. And by and large, they're part of our economy and part of our society.
Anthony, when we talk about the class, is it true to say that you can tell a lot by the accent, by the language people speak, and the received pronunciation is apparently only 7%. So people speak with the correct English. Only 7% of the population.
Well, certainly I'd take issue with correct English. It is not correct English. It is not, somebody from Yorkshire with a strong Yorkshire accent is as correct as the accent I use. So it's not exclusive. It happens, it has come about probably through what we call public schools and top grammar schools. And people at those who came from those tend to speak with what's called received pronunciation, or an Oxford accent, which is again an illusion. It does identify you as possibly being privately educated, possibly, not exclusively. Be careful about that, because some people just talk naturally like that anyway, and it doesn't set anybody aside really. I mean, good regional accents. There are hundreds of accents in this country, so my sympathies are with people learning English, because it's very difficult. I mean, to listen to somebody from Newcastle or Glasgow or Liverpool or Birmingham or Bristol, the accents can be very difficult. In fact, even for another English person.
Yes.
They're hard, but they're certainly not an indication of inferiority or superiority. They're just accents from a region.
What would you say to students who ask you to teach them British accent? They want to get rid of their accent and they want to speak with a British accent. You have just said there's more than 100 accents. And my reply is always, as long as you speak clearly, that's the main thing, because English or any language is for communication.
I think clarity is absolutely number one. I completely agree with you. And, so I think it also depends where you're going to be living. I mean, if you're going to be living up in Newcastle, it might be a very good idea to listen to Geordies, to listen to them. And there's a compromise between received pronunciation and using some of the local accents or words. You'll get on much better if you do that. The positivity, the positive side of this country, I mean, it's an incredibly, this is something I'm really proud of. I mean, I think this is, look, there'll be people out there who completely disagree with me, but I happen to think, and a lot of people would agree, that it's the most welcoming country possibly in the world. It's probably the most tolerant and diverse country in the world. There are other countries that can lay claim to that. I mean, France, Germany, America, Canada. But this country is amazing. It's got so many different nationalities, and it's because it's always been a country of invasion and immigrants. And acceptance of new languages and acceptance of new people. I mean, the Huguenots, the Jewish population in the Middle Ages, it's contributed to our culture. We've just absorbed them. And the same thing has happened subsequently. Of course, there's bigotry and bias and nastiness. One accepts that. And a percentage of that population will always exist. And it exists in every country. This country, the nationalism, and but we retain what is our identity and our pride in our country and our culture and our people and our achievements. And we welcome people. And as we've been welcoming them since 1066 when William the Conqueror came over. As long as you embrace that
Yes.
diversity as
Yes.
well,
True.
with enthusiasm, and if you have a sense of proportion, which is another thing, and above all a sense of humour, you'll have a great time here, and you'll do very well. We'll accept you. You'll get work.
Yeah, well, I'm a living example. I have been living in this country for 17 years. And yes, I do love this country, people, culture, everything. And I can only agree with everything Anthony said.
Well, that's nice to hear.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for taking your time, for coming here to speak with me.
Not at all.
So when in Britain, do as the British do. And Anthony has just told you and explained and described how you should be behaving if you want to be really successful in this amazing country. Thank you for watching. Bye.